Before we dive into this story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about family, secrets, and truth. Stay with me. You won't want to miss a single detail of what happened after 60 years of silence. I still remember the sound of her voice that night, fragile, trembling, like an old violin string that had held its tune for far too long. My grandmother hadn't spoken his name in 60 years, not once. Not even in whispers. But that night, sitting by the window of her crumbling farmhouse, she looked at me and said, "Elias," and just like that, the air shifted, heavy, electric, as if the ghosts she had buried were listening. The year was 1998. The house smelled of cedar and rain. Outside, the field stretched into nothing, the kind of nothing that eats sound. I'd driven 5 hours from the city because the nurse had called me, said she wasn't eating, barely sleeping, and had started talking in her dreams. "He's coming," she'd whisper in her sleep. I thought it was just the fever. But when I saw her, thin as paper, eyes sharp like glass, I realized she'd been waiting for this moment. For me, for truth. She asked me to sit, I did. The clock ticked like a heartbeat, slow and cruel. "Do you believe," she asked, "that love can rot?" I didn't answer. Her hand trembled as she reached for the locket around her neck, one I had seen 1,000 times, but never dared to open. "Because mine did," she whispered. And I buried it alive. Her eyes weren't those of the woman who raised me. They were haunted. I wanted to stop her, to tell her she didn't owe me her pain. But something in her tone, that mix of exhaustion and defiance, made me stay silent. She opened the locket. Inside was a small photograph, half-burnt, a man in uniform. "He promised me the world," she said. "But I paid for it with my soul." The story spilled out like a confession. 1938, northern Portugal. She was only 18 when she met him, Elias Moreira, a soldier with hands too soft for war and a smile that could silence thunder. He wasn't supposed to be there that night, at the harvest dance. But fate doesn't ask permission. He saw her. She saw him. And the world, she said, simply stopped moving. They were inseparable after that. Lettuce hidden in bread loaves. Meetings under the chapel bell. Love in whispers and stolen minutes. But then the war took him away. He promised to return, but months turned to years, and silence became her only reply. When his name appeared in the newspapers, it wasn't under missing, it was under hero. She should have been proud, but pride doesn't warm an empty bed. Then came the proposal from my grandfather, Manuel, a practical man, older, respected, already owning half the vineyards in the valley. "You'll never starve with him," her father had said. And she hadn't. But she'd never truly eaten either, not the kind of hunger love brings. She accepted the ring, not because she wanted safety, but because she'd already buried hope. When Elias returned, 2 years later, alive, limping, and furious, it was too late. He arrived at the wedding. The silence that fell when he stepped into the church still echoed in her memory. He didn't shout, didn't fight. He only looked at her, eyes full of disbelief, and said, "You chose a grave, Rosa." Then he left. And that was the last time she ever heard his voice. Her lips trembled as she spoke his name again, Elias. 60 years of silence collapsing into one fragile sound. "They told me he died not long after," she said. "But no one ever showed me a body. Only words. And I believed them." She looked out the window, as if she could still see him walking away. But lies don't stay buried forever. Her breathing slowed. The storm outside grew stronger. I could hear the wind clawing at the old shutters. "He came back," she said suddenly, her voice shaking. "Not in body, in truth. And I need you to help me find what they took from him." I didn't understand then, not yet. But that was the night everything began, the night silence broke, and the past started to crawl out of its grave. For days after that night, her words wouldn't leave me. "Help me find what they took from him." They sounded like a plea, but also like a curse, something too heavy to ignore, too dangerous to understand. I returned to her farmhouse the next morning. The fog still clung to the hills, and the air smelled of wet earth and fading time. She was sitting by the window again, the same spot, the same distant look. A porcelain cup of untouched tea trembled in her hands. "You came back," she said, her voice almost surprised. "I said I would," she nodded, slowly, as if each movement cost her years. "Then you deserve to know everything. But you must promise me one thing, child, that you won't hate me when you do." The words tightened something in my chest. Hate her? I couldn't imagine it. She'd raised me when my mother left, fed me with nothing but love and stale bread. But the way she said it, like she had carried that fear for decades, made me wonder what kind of truth could make someone hate the person who gave them everything. She told me about the years after Elias's disappearance, the respectable years, she called them, 1940 to 1955. Manuel built his fortune while she built a prison. They moved to Porto, into a grand stone house on Rua das Flores, with marble floors that echoed with emptiness. There were dinner parties, photographs in the papers, donations to the church. And behind all of it, silence. She wore pearls, smiled for the neighbors, and learned to pretend that comfort could replace passion. But the price of silence, she said, was obedience. Manuel was not a cruel man, not in public, not in the way people understood cruelty then. He was simply controlling. He liked things quiet, predictable, his way. She was told what to wear, where to go, who to speak to. Letters that arrived from unknown senders were burned and opened. I thought it was protection, she said, until I realized it was isolation. Then came the first child, my mother, Isabel. And for a moment, it seemed the walls softened. But even love was rationed in that house. Manuel insisted that Isabel attend private lessons, speak perfect French, never mention poor relatives or old lovers. He thought he could erase me by erasing my past, my grandmother said, her eyes glistening. But you can't kill memory. It only hides. She paused, her breathing shallow. In 1948, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, only a sentence, "He's alive." She looked at me then, searching, trembling, as if she still didn't believe it after all these years. The letter had come through a servant, a woman named Ines, who'd worked for them for nearly 20 years. She said it was slipped under the kitchen door, my grandmother whispered. No stamp. No name, just that one sentence, written in Elias's handwriting. I knew it instantly. You don't forget the way someone writes your name. I felt my pulse quicken. Did you show it to anyone? She shook her head. Manuel opened every drawer, every cabinet. He found it 3 days later. I told him it was nothing, a mistake, but he didn't believe me. He called me ungrateful, disloyal, accused me of trying to shame him. That night was the first time he struck me. Her hand brushed against her cheek, an old gesture that seemed to echo the bruise long gone. I should have run, she said, but I had Isabel. She was 6. And I knew what Manuel could do if I tried. So I stayed, I smiled, I lied. And every day I died a little more, the years blurred. The vineyards grew. Manuel's name became synonymous with power. But she carried Elias in the hollow of her heart, a ghost she couldn't bury. Then, in 1955, something changed. Ines, the maid, came to her one night, pale as chalk. "He's here," she said, "Elias. He's come for you." I leaned forward, breath caught. "He wanted to see me," my grandmother continued. "Just once. One last time. But there was a condition. He couldn't be seen, couldn't be known. The war had changed him. He was wanted for something they said he stole. Documents, names. I didn't understand it then. She met him in the chapel where they had first kissed, the same place that had once blessed her marriage to another man. She said he looked older, harder, but their eyes were the same. He told her the truth, that he hadn't died, that the army had used him, that he had uncovered secrets that could destroy men like Manuel. He wanted me to keep something for him, she said. Something small. Something that could cost lives if it fell into the wrong hands. I could see her shaking. What was it? Her lips trembled. A letter, folded in wax paper, with names written in code. He said it proved everything, who profited, who betrayed. He said if anything happened to him, it must never reach Manuel's hands. And did it? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes went to the window, to the same fog-covered hills where silence had begun. It disappeared the next morning. Ines was gone. So was Elias. No one saw either of them again. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine. They told me Elias was dead again, that Ines had stolen from us, run away. But I knew it was a lie. Manuel buried something that day. Something he feared more than death. She squeezed my hand, her voice almost breaking. That's what I need you to find. Not his body, his truth. They think time buried it, but time doesn't erase what's owed. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of the 60 years she had carried that secret alone. And that was when she said it, the request that would change everything. Go to the vineyard. She whispered, the old cellar beneath the chapel, that's where he hid it, before they came for him. The vineyard hadn't changed much since my childhood. The same dirt road winding between rows of vines, the same stone walls covered in moss. The same uneasy silence that seemed to hum beneath everything. I drove there the next morning under a pale grey sky, the kind that never fully wakes up. It was October, and the cold had already begun to creep into the bones of the valley. The gate groaned when I pushed it open. The smell of soil and grapes lingered in the air, thick with something else, the kind of stillness that feels almost deliberate. I parked near the old chapel, its bell tower leaning slightly to one side, its cross eaten away by rust. I had played here as a child, chasing butterflies and pretending not to be afraid of the dark doorway that led to the cellar. But that morning, the air felt heavier, charged. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. The old cellar beneath the chapel. That's where he hid it. The key to the chapel still hung in a small metal box near the door. I turned it and stepped inside. Dust and shadows swallowed me whole. The scent of candle wax and rot filled my lungs. Sunlight filtered weakly through the stained glass window, painting fractured colors on the cracked stone floor. The cellar door was half hidden behind a loose panel of wood, just as I remembered. I pulled it open and felt a gust of cold air hit my face, damp, earthy, ancient. The wooden stairs groaned beneath my feet as I descended. Each step sounded like a question I didn't know how to answer. At the bottom, I found what looked like a forgotten room, low ceiling, stone walls sweating with moisture, and a few empty wine barrels stacked in the corner. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing old crates, spider webs thick as cotton, and something else, a faint shape carved into the stone near the floor. A cross beneath it to letters E.M. Elias Morera. My pulse raced. I knelt, brushing dirt away from the carving. It wasn't random. It looked deliberate, like a marker. The floor beneath the cross sounded hollow when I tapped it. I found a loose stone and pried it up with trembling hands. Inside, there was a small metal box, rusted and damp. My fingers shook as I lifted it out. Inside, an envelope, sealed in wax. The wax was cracked, but still recognizable, a single letter stamped into it, a dot Rosa. I didn't open it right away. My throat felt tight, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a secret. It was history breathing again. When I finally broke the seal, the paper inside was yellowed, the ink faded. There were names, more than 20 of them, written in careful cursive, followed by numbers, and what looked like initials. At first, I didn't understand. Then I saw the familiar surname. Manuel Pereira da Costa. My grandfather. Next to his name, funding minus 1,942, Operation Verdi, my hands went cold. At the bottom of the letter, a line written in darker ink, added later, shakier. If they find this, they will kill me. Trust no one, not even her. Her. I felt my stomach drop. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Elias's. I didn't realize how long I'd been sitting there until I heard footsteps above me, slow, heavy, deliberate. I froze, the cellar door creaked open. Someone was inside the chapel. I killed the flashlight and held my breath. The sound of shoes scraping against the old floorboards came closer, then stopped right above me. I could hear the faint rattle of the metal key hitting the doorframe. Someone had followed me here. Minutes passed. The footsteps moved away, fading toward the exit. I waited until the silence felt real again before I climbed back up. When I stepped outside, the wind had picked up, scattering dry leaves across the ground. My car door was open. Inside, on the passenger seat, lay a folded note. It wasn't there before. 3 words written in black ink, "Leave this alone." No signature. I drove back to the farmhouse with shaking hands, the metal box on the seat beside me. My grandmother was waiting at the window, as if she'd known exactly when I would arrive. When I entered, she didn't speak at first. Her eyes went to the box, then to me. "You found it," she whispered. "I did," I said. "But someone else knows." Her lips parted. "Who?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But they left me a warning." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she looked away, her face tightening. "It's starting again," she said softly. I hoped time would bury it, but it never does. I opened the letter and placed it on the table. "What is this, Grandma? What does it mean?" She stared at the names, one by one, like old ghosts coming back to life. "They were all part of it," she murmured. "Manuel, the church, the soldiers, they called it Operation Verdi. They said it was for the country, but it was about money. Land, power, and Elias." She hesitated. "He tried to expose them. He thought the truth would save us. Did it?" She looked at me, eyes hollow, full of regret. "No. It destroyed everything." Her voice broke on the last word. She covered her mouth with her hand, as if afraid of what might come out next. That night, she barely spoke. I could feel something shifting in her, something she wasn't ready to face. I placed the letter in her trembling hands, and for the first time, she began to cry, not softly, but in a way that sounded like an old wound reopening. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. I thought it was just the storm, but I was wrong. It was the past finally waking up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, but the air in the farmhouse was still thick, electric, like it was holding its breath. My grandmother's sobs had quieted hours ago, but I could still hear them in the walls, like the house itself was mourning. I sat at the kitchen table with the letters spread out before me, reading the same names again and again until they stopped being names and became ghosts. Elias. Manuel. The others, politicians, officers, priests, all tied to a single operation no one had ever spoken about. Operation Verdi. My grandfather's name wasn't just on the list. It was circled, twice. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand answers, but something in my chest told me she wasn't ready, or maybe I wasn't. Instead, I waited. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 in the morning before I finally saw movement from the hallway. She appeared in her nightgown, hair silver and loose around her shoulders, eyes hollow but awake. "You found more than I expected," she said quietly. "You knew this was here," I said. "All these years you knew." Her expression didn't change. "I knew it existed, but I never saw it with my own eyes." She came closer, her gaze falling on the letter. "I thought it had burned with him, but Manuel, he must have known. He must have kept it hidden until the day he died." I pushed the paper toward her. "Then tell me what this is. Tell me why someone followed me there. Tell me why he wrote, 'Trust no one, not even her.'" Her eyes flickered. For the briefest moment, something raw flashed across her face. fear, guilt, recognition. Then she looked away. Because I betrayed him, she whispered. The words fell between us like glass shattering. I thought I was saving him, she continued, her voice trembling. Manuel found out about our meeting. He said he would kill him, and God forgive me, I believed him. I told Manuel where Elias planned to go, thinking he would only confront him. But he sent others instead, soldiers. Men I didn't know. They said it was to stop a traitor. I didn't understand until it was too late. She covered her mouth, shaking. Elias never made it out of the valley. They said he escaped, but I saw the blood near the chapel. I told myself it wasn't his. I told myself lies for 60 years because the truth was unbearable. Silence swallowed the room. I felt something inside me twist, pity, anger, disbelief. So you helped them? No, she said sharply. Not willingly. I was trapped. I was owned. Manuel held everything, my life, my daughters, the house, the land. If I defied him, I would lose everything. And yet, even in his coffin, he still wins. Because his scenes were buried clean, and mine, she pressed a trembling hand against her chest. Mine rot here. I wanted to hate her, just like she'd warned I might. But looking at her then, I couldn't. She wasn't the villain of her own story, just another casualty of his control. Then she did something I'll never forget. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a small key, old, tarnished, wrapped in a strip of faded fabric. This was his, she said, Elias's. It opens a drawer in the north cellar, behind the barrels. I never had the courage to look. But you must. Why me? Because the truth doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to you. Her voice cracked on the last word. She placed the key in my palm and closed my fingers around it. Her hand was cold, her pulse faint. You have to promise me something, she said. What? If you find what's inside, you burn it. Don't let anyone read it. Not the press, not the police, not even me. Promise me you'll destroy it. I hesitated. You want me to destroy the proof that could clear his name? Her eyes filled with tears. It won't clear him. It will destroy us all. Before I could respond, she turned away, her body trembling. Go in the morning, she said softly. Before they come again. Who? But she didn't answer. She just walked back to her room and closed the door. I sat there for a long time, staring at the key. My reflection trembled in the window glass, half lit by moonlight. I wanted to believe she was wrong, that truth, no matter how ugly, was better than silence. But as the first light of dawn crept across the vineyard, I began to understand that some truths don't set you free. They chain you to everything you tried to escape. When I went to check on her the next morning, her bed was empty. The window was open. The wind moved the curtains like slow, ghostly hands. On her pillow lay a folded note, written in the same delicate script I'd seen on the letter from Elias. Forgive me for what you're about to find. I don't remember the drive back to the vineyard, only the sound of the tires grinding over gravel and the wind screaming through the cracks of the old car. Her note sat in my pocket, burning against my chest like a second heartbeat. Forgive me for what you're about to find. I arrived just after sunrise. The sky was colorless, the kind of cold light that makes everything look like it's already dead. The chapel stood silent, half swallowed by fog. For the first time, I noticed something carved into the wooden door, faint, like someone had tried to sand it away long ago. Veritas vincit. Truth conquers. The words looked like a taunt now. The north cellar was different from the one beneath the chapel. Bigger, colder, built for wine storage decades ago. The stone walls were slick with condensation, the air thick with the sour smell of oak and mold. I moved between the barrels, counting 1, 2, 3, until I reached the farthest corner. That's where I saw it. A small iron drawer built into the foundation, half hidden by a broken crate. My hands shook as I took out the key. It slid in perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. When I turned it, something clicked, deep and final. Inside wasn't what I expected. No gold, no letters, no official documents. Just a small wooden box wrapped in oilcloth, and beneath it, a bundle of photographs tied with string. I unwrapped the box first. Inside was a reel of audio tape, brittle and dust-covered. On the label, a single word written in Elias's hand, Confisso. My heart stuttered. I set it aside and picked up the photographs. They were old, black and white, edges burned. The first showed a group of men standing near the vineyard, uniformed, smiling stiffly for the camera. I recognized one of them instantly. My grandfather, Manuel. Next to him, two priests and a government official whose name I remembered from a history textbook, Colonel Duarte Soares, a man once accused of war crimes and later declared innocent due to insufficient evidence. The next photograph made my blood run cold. It was my grandmother, Rosa, standing beside Manuel and Elias. The three of them together, smiling. The same year Elias was supposed to have disappeared, I flipped the picture over. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, Fundadores, Operaquo Verdi, 1941. I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. It didn't make sense. She'd said she was a victim, that she'd been manipulated, trapped. But this showed her standing beside them, part of whatever they'd done. My hands shook as I opened the last envelope buried at the bottom of the drawer. Inside, a letter addressed to Elias. The handwriting wasn't his. It was hers. Elias, I can't undo what we started. They will never let you walk away. If you try, they'll bury you, and me with you. I begged Manuel to stop, but he said you'd already gone too far. I'm sorry. When they come, don't fight them. I'll find you again when it's over. It wasn't signed, but she didn't have to. I knew that script too well. I felt something inside me fracture, not cleanly, but like a bone breaking in silence. My grandmother had lied. For 60 years, she'd painted herself as the victim, the prisoner. But she wasn't just part of the story, she was the story. I stumbled out of the cellar, the letter still clutched in my hand. The fog outside had thickened, wrapping the vineyard in a kind of quiet that didn't feel natural. I could hear the faint creak of the chapel door in the distance, moving with the wind. When I returned to the farmhouse, the nurse was waiting outside, her eyes wide. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said. "What?" She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Your grandmother, she's gone. They took her." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "Who? I don't know," the nurse said, to men. "Early morning. Said they were from the hospital. But they didn't leave any paperwork." My pulse roared in my ears. I ran inside, the room's cold and still. The bed was empty, the note gone. On the nightstand, a single item remained, the locket she always wore, its chain broken. Inside, the same photograph I'd seen before, Elias in uniform, but now, behind it, another one hidden under the frame. It was Elias again. Only this time, he wasn't wearing a uniform. He was lying on the ground, blood on his temple, eyes half open. And behind him, my grandfather's shadow. My hands went numb. That was when I realized what her forgiveness meant. She wasn't asking for peace. She was preparing for justice. I packed the photos, the letter, and the tape. Whatever was on that reel, Confisso, it was the missing piece, the thing that had kept her silent for 60 years. But I couldn't play it there. Not with eyes watching. Not when I didn't even know who was left to trust. As I stepped outside, the horizon was burning gold, the vines black silhouettes against the dawn. For the first time, I felt the vineyard's weight, all those decades of secrets growing like roots beneath the soil. I looked back at the farmhouse one last time. Something in the window moved, a curtain shifting, a glimpse of white. But when I looked again, it was gone. I drove away, the box on the passenger seat beside me, knowing that the next thing I would hear might not just change what I believed about her. It might destroy everything I thought I knew about my family's name. I waited until nightfall to play the tape. Something in me needed darkness, as if daylight would make the truth too real, too unbearable. I checked into a cheap motel outside Porto, one of those roadside places that smell like bleach and cigarette smoke, where no one asks for your last name. I locked the door, pulled the curtain shut, and set the reel-to-reel player on the table. The tape looked ancient, brittle around the edges, but when I pressed play, the machine groaned to life. Static filled the room, a raw hiss, then a click, then silence. Then his voice, Elias. It was softer than I expected, not the voice of a soldier, but of a man exhausted by too much truth. If you're hearing this, he began, then I am gone. Or I'm running. Maybe both. What matters is that the truth doesn't die with me. My heart pounded. I leaned closer. His accent was faintly rural, familiar, the sound of another time. If you're still here, I need you to do something. Pause for a moment and comment below. What would you do if you discovered a secret your family hid for decades? Would you forgive, seek the truth, or run away? And don't forget to hit like to show you're part of uncovering this hidden story. They call it Operation Verdi, he said. But it's nothing green. It's blood. It's land. It's power dressed as patriotism. They tell us we're protecting Portugal from its enemies. But the real enemy is greed. He paused. The faint sound of wind crept through the background, then his voice again, lower. I saw the ledgers, the shipments, the names. The church, the government, the generals, they all used the war to seize farmland, take gold from families who never came back. And Manuel Pereira da Costa, he stopped. My stomach turned at the sound of my grandfather's name. Manuel was no patriot. He was a broker, a man who sold silence. He bribed, he buried, he lied. And I helped him. God forgive me, I helped him. The words cracked, like a confession he'd been choking on. We took property from men accused of treason, men who never had trials. I signed papers I didn't understand, until I found the list. The names of those they executed, their lands reassigned. That's when I tried to stop it. That's when I met Rosa, my breath caught. She believed in me, at first. Or maybe she believed in redemption. But when she saw how deep it went, how Manuel had already used her father's debts to buy his way in, she broke. She tried to warn me, said Manuel would come for me. I didn't listen. Love made me blind. And when the soldiers came, I still thought she could save me. He went silent for several seconds. I could hear breathing, heavy, uneven, then a soft sound, like he was fighting tears. She told me she loved me, he said finally, and I believed her. Even when they dragged me into the woods, I still believed. But when they left me there, bleeding, half-buried, praying to die, I realized she wasn't there to save me. She was there to watch me fall. My throat tightened. I wanted to stop listening, but my hand wouldn't move. They said she begged for mercy, he continued. Said she didn't know. But her signature was already on the documents. She signed the transfer that gave my family's land to Manuel, the vineyard, the chapel, everything. My home became the ground that would later grow her fortune. He coughed, the sound wet, weak. If you ever find this, he whispered, know that I don't hate her. I pity her. We were both pawns. But she had a choice. And she chose silence. The tape clicked again, mechanical, final, but then a new sound emerged. Softer, quieter. A woman's voice. Rosa. It was faint, but unmistakable, older than the stories she'd told, trembling with guilt. If anyone ever hears this, she said, know that I didn't mean to become the villain. Manuel said it was to save Elias's life. That if I helped sign the papers, Elias would be freed. I believed him. I needed to believe him. But I saw what they did after. I saw the fire. Her voice broke. I tried to dig where they buried him, but there was nothing left. Just blood in the earth. I thought about ending my life that night. I even went to the river. But he appeared again, or maybe I imagined it. I heard him say, "Don't let it die with you," and so I didn't. I built this house, this legacy, so his name would stay here. Somewhere, then silence again. The tape spun for another minute, then stopped with a dull clack. I sat there, motionless. My heart was pounding, my hands slick with sweat. So it was true. Every lie, every silence, every smile my grandmother had worn for 6 decades, all of it had been a mask carved by guilt. She hadn't been a victim or a monster. She had been both. I poured a glass of water, but it tasted like dust. The air felt heavier, as though the truth itself had weighed. I replayed the last part, listening to her voice again and again until it sounded less like guilt and more like a prayer. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. At the very end, buried under the static, a faint sound. A location whispered in Portuguese. Alestu pouco. Tres Poços. Sobe Oliveira, east of the well. 3 steps. Beneath the olive tree, a map. A direction. I froze. The vineyard had an old well, the same one I used to throw stones into as a child. There were olive trees lining the east fence. I looked at the clock, 3:27 a.m. By dawn, I was already driving back. The fog was lifting as I reached the well. The olive tree stood just as she'd said, gnarled, ancient, its roots curling through the earth like veins. I knelt and started to dig. The soil was soft, damp from the rain. Minutes passed. My hands were raw, nails packed with dirt. Then my fingers hit something solid, a boxed metal, small enough to fit in both hands. I lifted it out, brushing off the mud. The latch was rusted, but it opened with one push. Inside was a single item, a ring. Gold, inscribed with initials, EM, and below it, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with time. If you're reading this, then you know the truth. Don't let them rewrite it again. The vineyard doesn't belong to my name, it belongs to hers. Let her rest. Let me be forgotten. Signed, Elias Moreira. The morning sun cut through the fog, lighting the valley in pale gold. I stood there, ring in hand, tears burning behind my eyes. He hadn't wanted vengeance. He'd wanted peace. But peace doesn't come easy to the living, because as I turned back toward the farmhouse, I saw movement through the trees, to dark silhouettes, watching. They'd followed me. Again. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. The fog distorted everything, shapes blending, branches bending. But then one of the figures moved, slow and deliberate, stepping into a streak of sunlight, a man. Tall, dressed in dark grey, his coat swaying slightly in the wind. Behind him, a second figure, smaller, face obscured by a hat. They stood by the olive tree line, motionless, as if carved from the very earth I'd just unearthed Elias's secret from. I froze, still clutching the metal box to my chest. My heart thudded, heavy and rhythmic, as though my body already knew I was standing between past and danger. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking in the still morning air. No answer. Only the rustle of the olive leaves. I took a cautious step backward, my boots sinking into the soft soil. Then the taller figure began walking toward me, not hurriedly, but with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing something you don't. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice deep, accented, but unmistakably local. "That land's been quiet for 60 years. Let it stay that way." His face came into view, wrinkled, but sharp-eyed. I recognized him from old photos in my grandmother's albums. Joaquim Faria. He'd been one of the estate workers back in the 1960s, before disappearing without explanation. But the other person remained behind him, silent, watching. "I didn't come for trouble," I said carefully. "I came for answers." He smiled, but it wasn't kindness, answers. "There are no answers here. Only bones." He gestured toward the box in my hands. "And you just dug one up." I felt my throat tighten. "What do you want from me?" Joaquim tilted his head, studying me. "Same thing they all wanted from Rosa. Silence. The smaller figure stepped forward then, and my breath caught. It was a woman. Younger, maybe late 30s. Her eyes were cold, precise, to knowing. "She's not leaving with that," the woman said, her voice smooth as glass. "If that recording ever surfaces, it won't just stain your family name. It'll destroy legacies, political ones. Do you understand?" I stared at her, realization slowly dawning. "You're with them," I said quietly. "The Foundation," she didn't deny it. The Foundation, the charitable organization that had funded the vineyard's restoration after my grandmother's death, had always seemed too eager to help, too generous. They claimed to be preserving Portuguese heritage, but now I saw it clearly. They were protecting something else. "I'm not giving it to you," I said. My hands trembled, but my voice steadied. "You've already taken enough from this land," the woman sighed. "You don't understand what you're holding. That tape implicates people whose names are carved on parliament walls, whose portraits hang in museums. It's not history anymore, it's currency. Dangerous currency." Her calm terrified me more than shouting ever could. "Why now?" I asked. "Why follow me?" She exchanged a glance with Joaquim. He looked uneasy, almost guilty. "Because you started digging," she said simply. "And you weren't supposed to find the map." I took a step back. The box felt heavier by the second. The woman reached into her coat pocket, not for a weapon, but for a small envelope. She tossed it at my feet. "Open it," she said. Inside was a photograph, faded, grainy. It showed a young Rosa standing beside a group of men in military uniforms. One of them was Elias. The others I didn't recognize until my eyes fell on the man standing beside Rosa, hand on her shoulder, smile to rehearsed. Manuel Pereira da Costa, my grandfather. And behind him was Joaquim. I looked up, and he met my eyes with something that looked like shame. "I told them to let him go," Joaquim muttered, almost defensively. "I didn't know they'd kill him. I thought it was just intimidation. You helped bury him," I said, my voice trembling. He looked away. "We all buried something back then." The woman took a step closer. "We're not here to hurt you. But if that recording leaves this valley, if it's ever copied, there will be consequences. People will die. Not you, maybe. But others." I felt something inside me break, not from fear, but from fury. People already died. Silence. For a moment, even the birds stopped. Then she said, quietly, "We can make you an offer." I laughed, hollow, bitter. "You think this is about money?" "No," she replied, her gaze cutting through me. "It's about survival. Yours and everyone tied to that name." I didn't realize I was crying until a tear landed on the box lid. "I came here for peace," I said. But all I found was rot. I turned and started walking toward the farmhouse. Neither of them followed. I think they knew they didn't have to, that fear would do their work for them. When I reached the house, I locked the door and placed the box on the kitchen table. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, eyes red, face streaked with mud and tears. I played the tape again, listening to Elias's voice through the static. Each word felt heavier, like it was meant for me now. Don't let them rewrite it again. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted silence, they'd have to earn it. I scanned the recording onto my laptop, made 3 encrypted copies, and sent them, one to a journalist I trusted, one to a historian in Lisbon, and one to a private cloud server under a false name. Then, for the first time in my life, I felt calm. Until the phone rang. Unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke, but I could hear breathing slow, controlled. Then a whisper. "You shouldn't have pressed play." The line went dead. I stood there in the dark, the hum of the tape machine still spinning behind me. And for the first time since finding that box, I realized the story wasn't over. Someone else still wanted Elias's name buried, permanently. Sleep was impossible that night. The sound of the wind outside the farmhouse windows seemed to whisper his name, Elias. Elias, like the land itself, was restless after being forced to stay silent for so long. I sat by the old kitchen table, the box still open, the tape recorder beside it, and the faint hum of the machine filling the dark. Every creak of the wooden floor made me glance toward the door. Every flicker of shadow reminded me of the call, the voice that told me I shouldn't have pressed play. At 2:47 a.m., I found something I hadn't noticed before. Beneath the lining of the metal box, hidden under the velvet, there was a false bottom. My hands shook as I pried it open with a knife. Inside lay a folded piece of yellowed paper tied with a thin strand of lace. The handwriting on the front was elegant, fragile. Para quem vir depois de mim, Rosa M to whoever comes after me. I unfolded it carefully. The paper crackled like old leaves, and the ink had faded in some places. But I could still read every word. I have carried 2 lives in one body, the one the world saw, and the one I buried with Elias. For 60 years, I wore my guilt like a rosary, counting each year as a prayer I did not deserve. They told me signing that document would save him, that if I gave up my father's land, Manuel would spare Elias. I believed them, and for one day, I believed he was free. Until I saw the fire in the distance. When I realized the truth, I begged Manuel to stop. He laughed. Said love makes fools of women, and money makes gods of men. He said Elias's death would make us rich, respectable. He said Portugal was built on sacrifices like his. I could almost hear her voice as I read it, older, breaking on the edges of her own confession. The vineyard you walk upon was watered with his blood. And the olive tree hides more than roots. It hides the last thing he said to me. My heart skipped. There was more. After they left him in the valley, I went back that night. I couldn't find his body, but I found something else, a ring, and a note he left behind, wrapped around it. I built this house so that his name would never be erased completely, even if I couldn't speak it. The foundation, the donations, the legacy, they were all distractions. I was keeping them close so I could watch them rot from the inside. I leaned back in my chair, trying to breathe. So she knew. She'd been living among them, pretending loyalty while quietly sabotaging their work, year after year. There was a final paragraph, written in smaller, trembling letters. If you ever find this, my child, do not seek revenge. They will try to frighten you, buy you, or make you disappear. Let them think they've won. Because the truth isn't theirs to bury, it belongs to time, and time forgets no one. It was signed, Rosa Moreira de Costa. I stared at her name for a long time. My grandmother, the woman who had taught me how to braid my hair, how to bake bread, how to smile when life was cruel, had been fighting a war long after everyone thought it ended. And now that war had come to me. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I left the house and walked toward the vineyard again. The fog clung to the ground, heavy and cold. The olive tree stood like a sentinel over the well. I knelt beneath it and whispered the name I'd only heard in old stories. Elias, the name tasted like salt on my tongue. Behind me, gravel crunched. A car door closed. I turned and saw a black SUV parked by the main road, the same kind the foundation used. 2 men stepped out. One wore a suit, the other carried a briefcase. Their expressions were calm, almost rehearsed. Miss D.A. Costa, the man in the suit, called out. We need to talk. I stayed silent, gripping Rosa's letter in my pocket. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. You've created quite a problem for us, he said. Those files you sent, they've been intercepted. We recovered one, but 2 others are still out there. If you give us access, this can all end quietly, quietly. The same word my grandmother used for her shame. The same word my grandfather used for threats. The same word that had kept Elias's name unspoken for 60 years. No, I said. It ends differently this time. The man sighed, rubbing his temples like I was a stubborn child. You don't understand. The people involved in this, they're not history. They're power. And power doesn't care about ghosts. I looked at the well. Maybe it should. Before he could speak again, the second man opened the briefcase and held up a document. My family's vineyard deed, the same one Elias said was forged. Sign it back to the foundation, he said. We'll forget everything. I laughed. It came out bitter, almost hysterical. You think this is about land? About money. It's always about money, he said flatly. Something in me broke then, the same something Rosa must have felt when she realized Elias was gone. I pulled the ring from my pocket, Elias's initials still glinting in the morning light. This, I said softly, is what it's about. I threw it into the well. It made no sound when it hit the water. Only silence, deep, endless silence. The men watched, unsure what to do. Then I turned and walked past them, back toward the house. When I reached the front steps, I heard the faint sound of an engine starting. I didn't look back. Let them think they'd scared me into obedience. Let them believe silence was victory. Inside, I opened my laptop. The upload bar for the third file, the one to the historian, reached 100%. Then, with trembling hands, I sent one last email. Subject for the record. Body, the vineyard never belonged to us. It belonged to him. Attached, Rosa's letter. The message sent. The screen blinked once, then steadied. Outside, the wind carried the sound of the sea. For the first time, it didn't sound like whispering. It sounded like release. But peace never lasts long in stories like ours. That evening, as the sun set over the valley, a knock echoed at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. When I opened it, a small envelope lay on the doorstep. No name, no sender. Inside, a single photograph, recent. The olive tree dot the well. And beside it, a freshly dug hole. By the time I reached the olive tree again, the light was fading into that blue half-darkness where everything looks both alive and dead. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil. The photo in my hand trembled not from the wind, but from my pulse. The hole in the picture had been new, the dirt still fresh. But when I arrived, it was already filled. Someone had been here before me. I knelt, pressing my palm against the earth. It was damp, recently disturbed. My fingers came away muddy, but something metallic glinted under the surface just a corner, half buried. I dug with my bare hands, ignoring the sting of splinters and stones, until I pulled free a small tin container, newer than the old box I had found days before. Inside it was a phone modern, black, without a SIM card and a folded note. The handwriting wasn't Rosa's. It was precise, almost mechanical. You think you're exposing history. You're not. You're rewriting it. Stop before someone else does it for you. And below that, written in a different pen, shakier, like the hand of someone afraid but determined, if you want the truth, come to the chapel at midnight. Come alone, no signature. My body reacted before my mind did. I felt a surge of adrenaline, fear mixing with something sharper curiosity, maybe even defiance. Whoever left this note knew everything. The chapel, the same one Elias mentioned in the tape, the one built on his land. The drive there was a blur headlight slicing through fog, gravel crunching under tires. The vineyard rolled away behind me like a sleeping giant. When I reached the chapel, the iron gate was ajar. The building had aged into ruin, its walls cracked, its bell tower leaning like it carried too much guilt. I pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, candles flickered along the altar. Someone had lit them recently. Their wax dripped in slow, trembling lines like they were bleeding light. And then I saw him. Joachim. He was standing near the front pew, the same grey coat, but his face looked older, hollowed out. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. I had to, he nodded, almost sadly. You always were like her. I stepped closer. You sent the note, he hesitated. I had to see if you'd listen. Why? He looked toward the candles, as if expecting them to answer for him. Because they're coming for you. The foundation. They think if they erase the last piece of this story, they can keep their world intact. But you have something they don't, her letter, the truth. I studied him carefully. You helped them bury him, Joachim. Why help me now? His shoulders sagged. Because I couldn't bury my own soul with him. He walked to the altar, reached behind a loose stone, and pulled out a small wooden cross wrapped in cloth. This was his, he said, Elias's. I took it from the site before they burned everything. I told myself it was for safekeeping, but really, I was afraid. Afraid of what silence would make me. He handed it to me. The wood was scorched on one side, the initials barely visible, EM. My throat closed. Why give it to me? Because the land is watching, he said. And because your grandmother didn't die the way they told you. The air seemed to stop. What are you talking about? Joachim's eyes glistened. They said it was her heart. But I was there that night. I saw the car parked outside. 2 men went in. She was already sick, but they made sure she'd never speak again. The foundation couldn't risk her confession being found. They left her with a smile on her face because guilt can look like peace when you're dead. I felt the world tilt. My chest went cold, like every breath was made of glass. You're lying, he shook his head. I wish I was. I turned away, pressing my palms against the cold marble of the pew. I wanted to scream, to tear the truth from the walls. All those years I thought she died in her sleep, whispering prayers for a man she once loved when in truth, they'd silenced her. Joachim stepped closer, lowering his voice. You still have time to disappear. Leave Portugal. Forget this. If you stay, I cut him off. No. If I stay, I finish it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The candles flickered harder, their light shifting across his face. Then something outside cracked, a branch snapping under weight. Joachim turned sharply. They're here, he whispered. I looked toward the door, shadows moving beyond the frosted glass. Take the back, he said. Go through the vestry. There's a path to the cliffs. They won't follow you there. What about you? He smiled faintly, tired. Maybe it's time I stopped running. He turned toward the main door as it burst open. Figures in dark coats stormed in, flashlights cutting through the dust. One shouted his name. Another aimed a gun. Joachim raised his hands. She's gone, he said. I slipped through the back passage, heart hammering, the cross clutched tight in my hand. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I ran down the hill, following the narrow trail toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Behind me, distant shouts echoed, followed by a single gunshot. Then silence. The kind of silence that feels final. I stopped at the edge of the cliff. The sea roared below, black and endless. I held the cross up to the wind, tears cutting through the grime on my face. Your name's not buried anymore, I whispered. Neither is hers. The phone from the tin box vibrated in my pocket. One message. Unknown number. You can't save ghosts. I looked out at the horizon, the sky bleeding red into black. No, I said quietly. But I can make sure they're never forgotten. I threw the phone into the sea. It vanished in the dark, swallowed whole. The wind howled. Somewhere behind me, the chapel bell rang one soft, hollow, mournful. I didn't turn back. Because sometimes, the only way to end a story like this is to walk straight into the silence it leaves behind. I stood on the cliff as dawn began to paint the ocean in streaks of rose and gold. The wind tore at my clothes and hair, but I barely felt it. My hands were still gripping the cross, the wood smooth from years buried in the earth, yet heavier now with the weight of decades of secrets. Behind me, the vineyard stretched like a sleeping giant, bathed in the soft light of morning. For the first time, I saw it clearly, not as a place of betrayal, but as a monument to truth, no matter how cruel. I returned to the farmhouse hours later. The house was silent, empty, and oddly peaceful. The doors were locked, the windows shuttered, as if the house itself had finally exhaled. I placed the cross on the kitchen table, next to Rosa's letter and the old tape recorder. For a long moment, I sat there, the weight of all I had uncovered pressing down on me like a tide. The decision I had made on the cliffs burned in my mind, the files, the letters, the photographs, the tape. They had to see the light of day. If justice had taken too long, if vengeance had been denied, then the truth at least could endure. I picked up my laptop and typed carefully, sending encrypted copies to journalists, historians, and human rights organizations. The files carried names, deeds, and confessions. They carried guilt and shame, but also the echoes of a man and a woman who had loved, who had been trapped, who had fought in the only way they could. Hours later, when the first article appeared online, I read the headline aloud. My voice hoarse from shouting the truth into the wind of the house. Secrets of Operation Verdi revealed. The Vineyard TH. At hid a legacy of lies. The words felt heavy, true, and irrevocable. I thought of Elias and Rosa, and for the first time in 60 years, their names were free. I walked through the vineyard, touching the vines that had once hidden bodies and whispers. Each step felt like a reconciliation. The chapel still leaned to one side, its bell tower cracked, but it no longer seemed like a monument to fear. It was a marker of endurance, of stories that refused to die, no matter how much the world tried to silence them. Later that evening, I returned the items to the olive tree near the old well, the ring, the letters, the small cross. I buried them in a new grave, simple and unmarked, leaving behind a stone as a sign. The soil was cold and damp, but there was something pure in laying it to rest. This time, it was not about hiding secrets. It was about honoring them. I stood there for hours, listening to the wind through the branches, imagining the past settling into the earth. Rosa's voice seemed to whisper again in the rustling leaves, Elias's in the wind over the vineyard. It was a quiet, sad, and beautiful chorus of lives once silenced, finally heard. When I finally turned to leave, the horizon glowed with light. I knew the Foundation would try to erase the story, intimidate those who knew it, perhaps even threaten me. But the world had already seen a glimmer of truth. Names carved into history could not be fully erased. Lies could not survive the weight of evidence forever. Years later, I would return to the vineyard, now alive with tourists and students studying history. I would watch people walk among the vines, ignorant of the blood and secrets beneath their feet, yet carrying forward a legacy my grandmother and Elias had tried to preserve in their silence. I would tell the story sometimes, quietly, to those who asked, leaving out nothing, because the past deserved honesty. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set low and the wind stirred the olives and the chapel bells echoed faintly, I would whisper their names into the dusk. Elias Moreira, Rosa Moreira de Costa. Names freed after 60 years. Names that had survived fear, betrayal, and silence. Names that now belonged to the world. I had inherited their story, their pain, their courage. And in doing so, I had finally learned that truth, no matter how heavy or painful, was the only legacy worth leaving behind. Because silence can protect, silence can hide, but silence cannot honor. Truth does. And the vineyard would remember. The story doesn't end here. If this moved you, subscribe now and turn on notifications to follow every revelation and every secret still buried in the past. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that truth, because some stories were meant to be uncovered and remembered forever.